It's been a crazy experience just to be part of hearing people's story and really them seeing how God can take whatever terrible thing you're going through, even right now, and turn it around for some good.
Welcome to Navigation and Discovery with Cameron Singh. On this episode, we are going to be talking to Pastor Aaron Burke, who recently released his new book, The Unfair Advantage: 7 Keys from the Life of Joseph for Transforming Any Obstacle into an Opportunity. You're going to enjoy this discussion that I had with Pastor Aaron Burke. And just to tell you a little bit about who he is, in September 2013, Pastor Aaron and his wife Katie took a major step of faith and planted Radiant Church in Tampa, Florida. Their dream of seeing Tampa Bay impacted by the kingdom of God is daily becoming a reality. And since its launch, Radiant Church has seen an incredible growth and expansion, planting 7 physical locations and an online campus. Aaron has a heart for multiplication and continues to open locations throughout Tampa Bay. They firmly believe that the best is yet to come for Radiant Church and Tampa Bay. So I really hope you enjoy this podcast episode, and also we will provide some details on how you can purchase Pastor Aaron's book once the podcast is complete. We thank you so much for tuning in, and hope you enjoy this interview with Pastor Aaron. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Aaron, for being on the podcast. Looking forward to getting to know you more and also talking about your new book.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about your new book, The Unfair Advantage. What inspired you to write this, and what's the heart of the book?
Yeah, so it was a few years ago. I'm praying over a girl on our staff who was just struggling. She had been through some really terrible scenarios in her life and her family. And as I was praying for her, I just kept saying the phrase, it's unfair. It's unfair, the divorce that your parents walked through. It's unfair, the abuse, unfair, the neglect. And as I'm saying this, I really felt the Holy Spirit speak and say, Aaron, it's unfair, but it's for her advantage. And I kind of stopped everything, took out a piece of paper and wrote down the unfair advantage. And that kind of started this conversation, started this idea of researching not just my life, but the life of Joseph in the scripture. A young man who at 17 years old gets a dream from God. And the path to get to that destiny was long, it was hard, and it was unfair. But every unfair thing he went through was for his advantage. And so preached it at a conference in February of 2020 to about 2,000 pastors in Dallas. And about 3 authors walked up to me afterwards, one being Mark Batterson, big Christian author, and said, you got to write that into a book. So that's where it went. And the whole world shut down. So during COVID, I wrote it into a book. And by God's grace, it got published. And I didn't do any of it. The Lord did it all. So it's been a crazy experience just to be part of hearing people's story and really them seeing how God can take whatever terrible thing you're going through, even right now, and turn it around for some good.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges I think people face is when they're in that funk, in the adversity, and they think just life is so unfair, and they think this is it. They're not going to get out of it. I really like it on the back of your book. It says, adversity can be your greatest advantage. Can you unpack that a little bit and what that means?
Yeah, I give story after story in the book. Let me give you one that I have not talked about at all on any other podcast. This is just for you. So it's my dad's story. My dad grew up ultra poor in in the Hialeah area of Miami, which is like tough area. His father was a compulsive gambler, my grandfather, and gambled away his college savings, everything. So my dad would come home sometimes and not have any food at the house. So one day he took matters in his own hands. He's middle school age. He went up the street. He found some mangoes and some avocados, and he started selling them on the side of the road. And he told me, he's like, Aaron, I'd sell them for a quarter a piece or 5 for $1. And I went out there and I'd sell a whole basket full and I'd have enough money to go buy groceries. Well, that's unfair. it is terrible that a middle school kid has to be on the side of the road learning and selling that way. But what my dad told me is it was during those days on the streets of Hialeah, I learned how to sell. And through that, he then ended up getting into owning marketing agencies and car businesses, became uber successful, provided an unbelievable life for me and my siblings. And all of that started with an unfair situation. So I say that there's things in your life that are just terrible. It's adversity. It's the rejection you went through. It's the divorce. It's the problems you're having, even with your children, and you're so frustrated. I want to show you, and I show you it through 7 different scenarios in the book, how it's possible to use that for your advantage. But there's crucial decisions we have to make during those times of what are we going to do during these seasons to turn this for the good. Because just because God promises he can turn things around for the good doesn't mean it happens automatically. It takes some decisions on our part. So I'll tell people it's available. It's not automatic. And you've got to make some crucial decisions when it comes to your attitude and your actions of how to see this thing turn around for the good.
That's awesome. One thing I wanted to touch on is, why does God allow good people to experience these unfair difficulties and struggles? This is something I know I'm challenged with, is why does God allow good people to go through these difficulties in life?
Yeah, I talked about that in the first, the introduction of the book, because the world is very broken. It's very messed up. And so we have a free will, and our free will is never going to make things better. It makes it worse. And that's why the adversity we're facing in the world today is all the consequence of sin. And so I used Joseph's brothers as a good example. So if you know the story, he's 17 years old. He gets a dream, the Joseph does, and that his brothers hate him. They plot to kill him. They lie about him. They sell him off into slavery. So my question for people would be, did God do that? Did God make his brothers do that? No, his brothers were sinful. They had, resentment and envy in their hearts. They made that decision. But our God is so good that even though he didn't cause it, he can use it for something great. So I tell people, God does not cause our pain, but he can use the pain of this fallen and broken world and redeem it for a greater purpose that he has for your life.
That's awesome, Pastor. So how have you seen God? How have you seen this occur in your life, and using our difficult circumstances for good?
Yeah. So I got saved at 16 years old. God radically transformed my life, and I called into ministry, had this whole moment, like I'm on a spiritual high. Everything's awesome. And then I get expelled from school the month before my 11th grade of high school ends. I was just voted senior class president, was running a Bible study on the school, and I get kicked out of this small little Christian school. And I was so depressed, so sad. I went from the high of the high to the low of the lows. And I remember sitting there going, God, this is so wrong. This is so unfair. Well, because of that, I ended up doing dual enrollment, which is kind of like you take your college classes while you're finishing up your high school year. So I did that my whole last high school year, because I wasn't going to go to public school. And so I ended up doing that. And I thought, man, this is unfair. I missed out on my high school. I didn't get to go to prom. I didn't get to do any of that stuff. But then I go to college, and I graduated 3 years instead of 4 years from school, because I had that year of the college done in high school. On the day of my graduation, I get approached by the director of our missions department at the college. And she said, he said, hey, we have an opportunity for you in the island of Sri Lanka, which is a country an island off the country of India, off the coast of India. And he goes, to full-time missionary, pay all your way to be there. This is right after the big tsunami hit that part of the world. It was devastating. And I remember being on that plane, Cameron. I mean, it was a God thing. On that plane thinking, the only reason I'm on this plane is because I finished college early. The only way I finished college early is that I got kicked out of high school at 11th grade, and I went to the junior college my senior year. The only way that happened is that principal, who didn't like me, had a vendetta against me. I said, man, I want to go and give that guy a big kiss on the cheek because I'm so happy now, because I thought there was no way it could be redeemed, but God used it for good. So I just tell people, listen, you're going to look back one day and you're going to be encouraged that the things that you hated so much that you had to go through were necessary for you to get to the potential and the breakthrough that God has for your life. And all of that happened by the time I was 21, by the way. And now I'm 39, and I can give you another 18 years of stories of unfair thing after unfair thing after unfair thing that was the lead to the breakthrough God had for my life. So I just want to encourage people that there's purpose behind it all.
Yeah, it's always when you come on the other side of that difficult season or adversity where you're like, oh, wow, I had to go through all that to be able to achieve where I'm at now. And for you was that missions to Sri Lanka. But, oftentimes it's during that difficult season where you're really in it. You're down in the dumps, you're at the bottom of it. And that's where it's so difficult. And I've experienced this myself too. When you're in those difficult seasons, is you almost just question things, you want to give up. Sometimes you even question faith, if
Yep.
those are listening people of faith. How do you get through it when you're in knee deep in that difficult season?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things, and that's why faith is so important for me, is because it's in those moments where I think one of the crucial phrases. So if people don't, if they're not, if they don't know the Bible, the history of this, it's that this guy Joseph gets a dream from God, gets rejected, gets thrown into jail, gets sold off into slavery, gets wrongfully accused, goes to prison for about 10 years before he actually sees the dream fulfilled. So it's a long story of really unfair things. And that's how some people feel in their life right now. But there's a phrase that is so crucial that's used all throughout the story. And the phrase is that the Lord was with him. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. So my encouragement for you is, if you're in a place where you feel like I'm by myself, I'm neglected, I'm abandoned, God is with you. God is with you. We need an awareness that I'm not alone in this thing. And this is why faith is so crucial to me. It's like, we're all going to go through hard times. Being a Christian does not exempt you from pain. It does exempt you from pain without purpose and without God's presence. You get both of those. So I want to encourage people today, if you're in the middle of it, lean into God. If you don't have a church community, get into a church community. This is where you can find so much hope, because I know being in the middle of it, where it just feels overwhelming and it feels discouraging, but God is with us during it.
That's so awesome. Wanted to touch on, what are the key takeaways that you want readers to have from your latest book, The Unfair Advantage?
I'll give you a couple of them that I think are so huge. It's, first of all, that nothing is by accident. So I think, I just believe in the sovereignty of God, that there's a reason behind it, and nothing's by accident. And so what you're experiencing right now, whether it's the loss of a job, the financial hardship, the struggle in your physical body, there's a purpose behind it all. So nothing's by accident. But here's the thing, is we have to make a decision to make sure we don't waste our pain. So everybody goes through it, but are you going to use it for something good? I think it's a Winston Churchill or one of those said, never waste a crisis. You've got, every crisis has got got some kind of lesson attached to it. So we're all going to go through stuff. It's going to be painful. God's with us, but there's a purpose behind it all. I'll give you a cool little example of the story. So Joseph gets thrown into prison for 10 years. That's a long time. Some people don't like it when a friend doesn't text them back in 10 minutes. Like, we think, it's just, we're very instant people, but God is looking the long haul. And he had this moment. He gets thrown into prison. And I was thinking about going, God, 10 years. Why couldn't you promoted him after a few months to second in command, the prime minister over all of Egypt? Why did it have to take 10 years? Then I did some research on Egyptian culture. And the ancient prisons didn't exist. Like, this wasn't a normal thing. If you did something dumb and stupid 4,000 years ago, they would just kill you. Like, that didn't make sense. But Egypt was so advanced. What they did is they educated their prisoners. So they would send teachers, professors into the prisons to educate them, to rehabilitate them into being good citizens and culture. And I thought, how much of that is like our God? Is that they have this moment where Joseph is given a dream. He's going to be over all these people. It's going to happen in Egypt, but Joseph is from hundreds of miles away. He doesn't know the language. He doesn't know the culture. He doesn't know the customs. And God takes him and puts him in college for 10 years to learn. So it's a beautiful picture of the fact that nothing was wasted. Even the dark season was a developmental season of what God wanted to do through his life. So if you feel like you're in like that dark season right now, it's frustrating. I'm not, I don't know what the purpose of it is. I'm sure Joseph felt that too, but there was a reason behind all of it, and God used it.
That's great. You reference a lot of biblical characters throughout this book, and there's a lot of lessons that you can learn from each of these characters in the book, and also the Bible too. What character do you relate to or resonate the most?
Oh my gosh, all of them. I mean, Joseph is my dude because Joseph is the story of my life. But Moses is another one. Moses is a super famous guy who everybody, if you watch the movies about Joseph, Moses, he's like 30 years old. But the reality is Moses was 80 years old when he went and got the people out of Egypt. So he spent 40 years in Egypt learning the customs of Egypt. He spent 40 years in the desert learning how to live in the desert. And then God said, okay, now you're prepared to go back into Egypt and deliver the people. So we have this mindset that, Moses is some young, cool dude that goes in there and delivers the people. He's an 80-year-old man. So it just shows me, like, you're never too old. You're never too late. You're never too young. You're never too uneducated. Let me just tell you, if you submit yourself to God, he will put you through a process, and it's going to take longer than you want it to be, but it's going to be better than you can ever imagine. He'll put you through a process that'll refine you to be all that he's called you to be.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm a huge champion of, is not letting your circumstances limit your opportunities, because once you do that,
absolutely,
you just limit yourself. Doesn't matter your age, where you're at in life.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on something not relevant to this book, but this is we're talking a lot about faith, and this podcast has faith-based listeners, people that don't believe in faith, or they're seeking faith because they feel like they need something more in their life. What advice would you have for those that are seeking faith in their life? What advice do you have for
Well, first of all, I think it's amazing that you're listening, and I think it's amazing that you're open to this. I think we all have to get to a couple different things. Is first of all, realizing that we cannot, something's missing in our lives when faith is not there. And I think that's like that's a unanimous kind of, you talk to the most staunch atheists, they all say the same. Like, there's just something missing, and we're always trying to fill it with something. And I would say what that missing piece is that God's not in your life. And so I would challenge you to really make it a point. The Bible says, and it's very clear, that God rewards those who seek him. So if you want to know God, you want to really experience him, make it a point to seek him. I would find a good, non-weird, Bible believing church in your community, get connected, but genuinely just pray. Prayer is just communication, and just pray and say, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. Lord, help me, and be honest about your doubts. By the way, I think that's what Jesus did so well. Jesus was okay with people that had doubts. And so you've got some doubts, you can vent them to your friends, but that doesn't help. Vent them to God. and watch what happens. And there's moments I get frustrated. Unfair seasons, I'm talking to God. I'm going, God, why is this? This is frustrating me. And I would just tell you, life is better with God. How do we experience life with God? Faith. Faith is that belief in what we can't see without evidence. It's a trust. And I'm telling you, it's worth putting your trust in, because I've seen it in my life. So, and by the way, don't think you've gone too far or messed up too much. That's why Jesus came. That's what we tell people. Like, when you look at the gospel, Jesus came for broken, messed up people. People think that their sin actually disqualifies them, but it's actually their sin that qualifies you to experience God, because that's why Jesus came. So I'm proud of you for even having the thought in your mind of going, I just feel like there's got to be more and I got to research it. I'm telling you, God will reveal himself to you.
Yeah, one thing I love hearing from my pastor is you don't have to change to come to God. He'll change you.
He will. He'll change it. And he'll know, he does it gently and filled with grace. And he's so good at it, but he's our creator, so he can do that. We can't change ourselves. We'll just be frustrated all the time.
That's awesome. Well, Pastor Aaron, where can people find more information on purchasing a copy of The Unfair Advantage?
Man, it is a lot of places that books are sold, but all online, obviously. There's a lot that are in stores too. It just depends on where you live. But I heard the other day that it was in a Cracker Barrel. I'm like, I don't know if you have Cracker Barrels where you're at, but I'm like, man, you've made it when your book's made it to Cracker Barrel. Come on, but anyway, it's Amazon's the easiest place, or Barnes and Noble, and so buy the book. I think it'll help you. Actually, I told people the other day, I said it doesn't help you if you buy the book. It helps you if you read the book. So read the book, it'll help you. And I know some people are in small groups and they like to go through it with their small group, and it's got discussion questions at the end of each of the 7 chapters, talk about the 7 unfair things. So love for y'all to go through it. You can find it on there, The Unfair Advantage by Aaron Burke. And follow me on social media. I got a lot of info and we do a lot of content about this kind of stuff on social media. And I'm just honored to be part of the podcast, and honored that you have me on.
And you also have a podcast as well, right?
I do. It's called Made for More. It's a leadership podcast. It drops. We do a series every year. We do 2 or 3 different series. And so we're in one right now on this content of the book, The Unfair Advantage, but talking about a whole leadership bent of how to take the unfair things in leadership for our advantage. And so I think it'll be something that'll help, especially those who lead a business or lead a church or lead your family. Like, it'll help everybody.
Yeah, and we'll drop a link so you can purchase the book in the podcast description, and also a link to Pastor Aaron's leadership podcast. Pastor Aaron, a few final questions, rapid fire, just to have our audience get to know you a bit more. What are you reading today?
I'm reading The Unfair Advantage by Aaron Burke. I just read a great book on, I just finished a good book called Traction, but I'm actually reading a book right now called Spiritual Leadership by Oswald Sanders. It's a book about leadership, but a spiritual bent to it. It's really good.
That's awesome. Dead or alive, who would you like to have lunch with?
Dead, Billy Graham would have been great. Love to have a lunch with him. Alive, I don't know. I don't know. Probably the president would be crazy. It'd just be wild. I'm all up for a conversation with anybody.
Yeah. Final question is, what's one bucket list item that you would like to do?
I want to cruise down the Amazon River and the Amazon rainforest. I haven't done that yet. So I want to go check it out.
Awesome. Well, last word of encouragement to our listeners.
Hey, there's a purpose behind the pain. You got to figure out, how can you get out of this scenario better than you went into it? And I'll tell you, with God's help, it can turn around for the good, so that you can say exactly what Joseph said. They intended to harm me, but God intended it for the good, for that which is being done right now. He knew that all that pain had a purpose. And I'm telling you, if you'll leverage the pain that you're in right now, God can use it for a greater purpose.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Aaron, for being on the podcast. If you're listening, be sure to get your copy of The Unfair Advantage by Pastor Aaron Burke. And we'll drop the links for that as well. And thank you again, Pastor Aaron.
Honored.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this podcast interview with Pastor Aaron Burke. You can get a copy of his latest book, The Unfair Advantage, on the link in the podcast description below. And you can also search it on any bookseller that's out there, such as Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. And really hope that you enjoyed this podcast and that it added value to your life wherever you are at. Also, if you haven't gotten a chance to purchase or get your hands on my latest book and my first debut book, Navigation and Discovery, A Path of Navigating and Discovering Through Your Journey of Faith. You can get your copy today at CameronSing.com. Again, it's CameronSing.com. You can find out more about me there and take a look at some of the other work that I'm involved with. And also, if you want to go directly to purchase the book, you can go to CameronSingBook.com. And all the links are in the podcast description on whichever platform that you're listening on. Thank you again for all your support, and feel free to give an awesome rating on whichever platform that you're listening to. And if you're listening on Spotify, feel free to comment, put question and answers on there, and I'll be happy to engage and respond to your feedback. Also, if you want to email me, I'll give you a shout out on the podcast in the future. You can email me at singcameron@gmail.com. Thank you again, and we will catch you on the next episode.